And now, the Dateline 29 News Special, A Wall of Water, A Time to Remember.
Amazing scenes from late June of 1995 when a wall of water swept through central Virginia. Hi, I'm Dave Cupp. Welcome to this special presentation of Dateline 29 News. There are a few reminders right now. The casual motorist would have no idea that that one-way sign over there was underwater, as was all the pavement and the bridge below it. Other trees that used to be there, of course, a year ago were piled up against this bridge, and unlike the way this river looked 1 year ago. Do you remember? Let's take a look back at the first day of the flooding, June 27, 1995. The rising rivers and water-covered roads are a sight to behold tonight.
And one of the most dramatic sights is at the Greene County-Madison County line. Our Kim Vaughn is there. Kim, what's it look like?
Well, Mary, if you can imagine, this what you're looking at is actually Route 29 north from here to Culpeper, and you can see that the entire bridge over the Rapidan River is blown out. That bridge went out at around 2:30 this afternoon, and at times this water was about 30 feet high. And that water is receding right now. Right now, I don't know how high it is right now, but you can see all the debris that's up by the bridge and everything. And
I'm Robert Van Winkle. The beautiful rolling hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia once looked a lot like the Rockies out west. Their appearance today can be attributed to erosion, and signs of erosion are everywhere, from fresh cuts in the hillside to rocks brought down during an ancient flood event still sticking out of the fields. And of course, these rocks and boulders I'm standing in now were brought down off the mountain just 1 year ago today. It was a busy day in the weather office, June 27th, 1995. This is how it looked on the 6 o'clock news as I summarized the rain using the NEXRAD radar images. But look at this thunderstorm right there. It just stayed right in Greene and Madison for hours and hours, dumping anywhere from 10, even as much as 13 inches of rain from some weather watchers in the Stanardsville area, north of Stanardsville. Again, Etland, Kriglersville, Stanardsville, right in through here, and now northwest Albemarle getting the brunt of it. A year later, I walked a flood site in Kinsey Hollow near Graves Mill in Madison with Scott Eaton. Scott is a graduate student in environmental sciences at the University of Virginia and has been studying the effects of the flood for the past year. Scott and others have documented over 500 landslides caused by the flood. Underneath the still fresh-looking scars on the mountainsides, some fascinating sights have been uncovered, including a deposit of ancient red spruce trees that haven't grown in Virginia for thousands of years.
This red spruce is indicative of a much colder climate. We had this carbon-dated radiocarbonated at the U.S. Geological Survey up in their Reston, Virginia offices. And the date that they came up with was 24,000 years before present.
Holy cow.
So
we're looking at a 24,000-year-old piece of wood right here.
That's correct.
Now, this would not have been able to have been discovered had it not been for the flood last year that was able to take away the topsoil and reveal
this, right? This whole area was covered by this big ledge of sediment all the way back over in here, so this was covered by this, and the water table was probably a lot higher. And because the water table was higher, it was able to preserve this wood essentially in saturated conditions, and see how it's protected by all the mud around it, so it kind of acted as a barrier, a seal, entombed it, so to speak.
And impressive as it was to touch a 24,000-year-old tree limb, I was amazed by the next site we went to.
On the right-hand side, we can see where the water actually had so much momentum coming out of the mountains that it went over 70 feet up the right bank.
Which is this point here.
This point over here, we see the large outcrop of rock sticking out. But what's incredible is if you look on the left bank, there's this lone little tree sticking by itself. The water really didn't have any height to it at all. So if you use some real basic equations, you can figure out what speeds this water or this debris flow is moving. And we project that the water is moving somewhere between 35 to 45 miles an hour.
Wow.
Down the slope.
Unbelievable. Although scarred and open today, this recent wound on a Madison hillside will heal itself with time. At our final stop, Scott and I found a place where evidence of past flooding was very clear.
You can see this string of boulders
jutting out of the dirt.
Yes.
Those
embedded in the dirt there, in the soil. And that layer extends all the way downstream as far as you can see behind us to where the tree is fallen down over top of that large boulder.
So these rocks here lined up that are sticking out were actually deposited here in a flood like this?
That's correct, yes.
How long ago?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out.
So the next time you look at the beautiful rolling hills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, you can remind yourself they got this way by erosion, wind and rain and catastrophic flooding over millions of years. You might also want to imagine a time when this whole area was covered with spruce trees, when the mountains were higher and colder and packed with snow and ice year-round. Terrain-altering flooding has occurred right here in the past, and it will occur in the future. We can only hope it won't happen again for a long time.
I can't even tell where the road came up in here anymore. It's just totally gone. That was Route 662 that came down in far.
In the aftermath of the flooding, some of the most dramatic pictures were taken from the sky. This video from a state police helicopter helped to paint a clear picture of the devastation. Not just bridges, but entire rural roadways washed away, their paths forever altered by a rushing wall of water. For the State Transportation Department, some of the most difficult repair work over the past year has been in Madison County in tiny communities like Ruth and Graves Mill. Let's take a look back with Tim Murtaugh and Ken Slack at the difference 1 year has made.
Section of the highway on Route 662. This section of the highway went on. Looks like the river's made a new route here.
We're trying to get the road open just the best way we can to get them people out of the hollow up there, because they ain't got no water. Most of them ain't got no food.
Taking supplies to the stranded victims, and right now the only way across the river for those victims is by foot.
We're at the beginning of Route 615 in Graves Mill, and at this particular location is one where the road was completely washed away, and a giant gully was created at the road. We're standing in about the center line of the old road, and the pink markers you see up there, about halfway down the bank of this gully, is the center line of the old Route 615. This area was so devastated, we decided we could not even try to put the old road back where it was before.
Others, like Route 662, will be saved. This is one of 4 spots in central Virginia where construction continues. But highway crews are doing all they can to build these roads and bridges to last.
Greene County saw its share of destruction as well. In the Middle River area of Greene, several miles of roads and bridges no longer exist. Lila Young hiked up the Middle River and filed this report.
An American flag marks one devastated homestead in the still raging Middle River. Automobiles submerged, a lawnmower half buried in the mud. This bulldozer and the pickup truck behind it appear to have been overtaken by the river as they raced to safety. And there's still a lot of water running down the mountain, here carving out a 15-foot waterfall over what used to be the road. Further down, the water is receding, leaving displaced fish lying in the puddles. While earth movers work around the clock to rebuild some semblance of a road, refugees who had been evacuated are now going back to check out the damage. Some hiked for miles through the muck and mud to retrieve valuables and pets.
My place is 2 miles above here, and everything I got is just covered over, rock and mud.
We live further back up on the mountain, and the rock slides and all the water missed the house by maybe 50 feet.
Charles Jarrell lives next to the Kinderhook General Store, right at the place where the Middle River leapt from its banks and flooded the entire valley.
Once it happened, it just happened so fast that nobody could get out, except the people who was close enough to run.
A week ago, this was someone's home, high up in the hills, but it washed down the mountain and ended up behind Mr. Jarrell's house, a total loss. You can just see where the bathroom was. Despite all the destruction, the people here say they will go back up into the mountainsides and rebuild their homes and their lives. In Greene County, Lila Young, Dateline 29 News.
Roads in Kinderhook were washed away, often leaving residents stranded until help came. But some residents didn't leave their homes. June 27, 1995, this water rushed with a fury that swept up anything in its path. Sonny Slaughter's house washed away, and so did nearly everything else he owned.
Lost part of the barn and a bunch of outbuildings, and I had a big shed above the house. I lost all of that and lost a lot of hay, lost 4 horses, lost my car. You know, just what I had left that day was my truck and what clothes I had on. Possibly could happen any time, but I mean, there's no need in worrying about it. You know, you can't stop and think about it. If something like that starts, you just go have to get out of the way.
A lot of people are still scared up here. And every time you see some of the people in a storm or heavy rain, they get scared, they're ready to run, leave, go to the high grounds or something. They're really scared.
Another memorable rescue, this one in Wolftown in Madison County, as Jim and Connie Crossgrove were plucked from their home by a helicopter. Beth Pugh talked with the 2 survivors to see how they're picking up the pieces 1 year later.
When we last spoke with Jim and Connie Crossgrove, they had just been airlifted by helicopter from their Wolftown home to Madison County High School.
Well, you know, I prayed. We both prayed. And we're here right now. We're here right now.
That was just 2 days after the wall of water came down Kirtley Mountain behind their house, forcing the Crossgroves to search for higher ground and fight for their lives.
It was a very, very difficult time.
Did you think you'd live through that?
No. We just prayed we would.
Yeah.
I can't say that there was a doubt. We just prayed that, please make this. Jim's mother taught me years ago that every dark cloud has a silver lining. It sounds hokey and corny, but there have been thousands.
Yeah. There have been literally thousands.
One silver lining is this hand-painted box found in the mud. Jim gave it to Connie when they moved into their home more than 10 years ago. Inside it says, "Our house and our love will always stand strong."
He was and is my strength, and I don't think that he...
No, I've stayed pretty much focused. I've got so much to do. You know, I mean, it was 3 months digging my house out, and now I'm starting a new house, so, you know, it's that kind of stuff. So it's kept me busy. I figure about a year from now, they'll be all of a sudden I'll have this crash hit me. You know, it's like I'll just be a blubbering idiot over in a corner for a day.
And then I'll be here for you.
In Madison County.
Now joining me from VDOT is Jerry Wills. He's been out also all day. And go ahead and tell me what you've seen today in terms of devastation and damage to bridges and roadways.
I've been here working for 20 years, and I haven't ever seen nothing like this before in the 20 years I've been working in the highway department.
Now with Bill Edwards. Now he's been out all day with the Madison rescue crews as people have been airlifted out and been rescued by boats and such. Bill, tell us what you've seen. Let's take a look at some of your video and just tell us how the day's gone.
Well, I headed out earlier today towards Graves Mountain Lodge on Route 231 outside of Madison, but I did not make it. As you could see, the road at a bridge that was past a White Oak Run, and that bridge, just north of that bridge, had collapsed. Coast Guard chopper was out surveying the area, and you can see there where the rest of the bridge dropped. Off of 653, just south of that area, you can see where acres and acres of water are covering everything. That was a propane tank that was leaking. You could see the hay bales were floating there. This is in Madison County at the high school, where they've set up a relief center for people who are going to have to put in, who were displaced this evening.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Now, Alice, Bill.
Again, we have little specific information coming out of Madison tonight. Phone communications have been sketchy. The county is simply inaccessible from the south. There have been helicopter rescues, of course, in Madison and Greene. There will be more tomorrow, and helicopters are also going to be taking food to people in high-lying places. But the advice tonight, stay where you are, and we'll have the latest about
what used to be a fourth-generation homestead has been in Jim Shotwell's family since the late 1800s. He says he just put $50,000 into the farmhouse, used as a rental property now, and he has no flood insurance. This is about as bad as the damage gets.
Well, it was just a standard iron and wood frame bridge across there that led from the house over to the barn that used to be highway maintained road. Behind it, there was a garage off to the right. There was a huge walnut tree, which is probably one of those over there now.
But where we're standing now used to be a horse paddock.
This was a horse paddock, fully fenced and grazed in grain grass and about 2 feet shallower than it is now.
Cars were moved by torrents of water down the mountain, through a culvert, coming to rest miles away.
What used to be an Isuzu Trooper stopped, its headlights burned all night long.
In a flood like this is not the property that's lost, but the people. Now, fortunately, loss of life appears to be light in this flood, but the victims feel the effects of the water physically, financially, and emotionally. Our Ken Slack has been with some of the people of Madison County today. Ken, what have you seen? Who have you talked to?
I've actually been surprised at many of the people here who after just a day of seeing their homes washed away, a lot of their belongings going down the river, that they're taking it in stride, as Central Virginians seem to manage to be able to do. They've got a long road to recovery ahead of them, but as the rains have slowed and now have stopped, as the floodwaters are starting to recede a bit, the recovery efforts are on the rise.
Graves Mill in Madison County was one of the hardest hit areas from last year's flooding. A site just down this river provided some of the most memorable scenes from the flood. The home of Randall Lillard found itself directly in the path of a rushing wall of water. We saw the Lillard property from the air a few days after the flooding, and their story reminds us that although the flooding seems like yesterday, it'll be many more tomorrows before things are back to normal.
This is the Lillard farm there on the right. This is where you can see some of the livestock that was killed in the flooding. The house is totally destroyed. You can see the house. And the rest of the farm is gone. You can see the corn crops gone.
Randall Lillard is planting corn in this field, a small miracle considering this land was left covered with boulders and stones after last year's flood.
Weather permitting, we should finish the corn planting next week.
Volunteers and family members helped remove all these stones from this field by hand, one at a time. The field wasn't the only casualty of the flood. The Lillards' farmhouse was destroyed as well. They have now sold the home to a man who is using the pieces to build another house.
Well, we just wanted to get done, get it over with. It's depressing.
Watching the house come down makes the Lillards sad, but they say the family itself is recovering well. Mr. Lillard's daughter-in-law, Claire, and her two small children, Greg and Katie, were in the house during the flood.
He was asking when the flood was going to happen again. I was sort of scared that he was frightened and would scar him for life, but we lived with his grandparents and his aunt and uncle and several of his cousins, and he just wanted it to happen again so we could all live together for about 5 weeks like we did last summer.
Cleaning and rebuilding this piece of property isn't the only project for the Lillard family. Mrs. Lillard is in charge of the Graves Mill post office, which was completely destroyed during the flood. She set up a temporary post office in this church. A year later, the post office still hasn't been rebuilt. While Mrs. Lillard says the post office building may never be rebuilt, Mr. Lillard is sure his family will never rebuild a home where their old house once sat.
Because of the flood, that would be in the back of our mind, you know, when we're having a hard rain, you know, when we're having a flood, and I couldn't live here.
If we had taken all the help that was offered, we would have had half of the state of Virginia's emergency services people here. We had people call from New Orleans. We had people call from California. Can we help from New York? I mean, you just can't believe the help that's there.
Although it's now 1 year later, the floods of 1995 taught Madison County residents a hard lesson on the power of Mother Nature, and it's a lesson they will always remember.
I have a friend of mine that's on the other side of the ridge, and he carries a little bag with him, all his medicines, you know, extra money, whatever, because he said, I'm not going to get caught without again. It's, and hopefully it won't happen, but you know, you live through it, and it's, you don't forget it. You know, it's something that the people that went through it will never, I'm sure, never forget.
In Madison County, Londra Booker, Dateline 29 News.
The water has moved this whole house, wrecked most of it. We're okay. The barn, hog house, new shed, cone house. Everything's gone except what we're in. Water running out the garden, running down the steps. Three pigs there. That's the end of the house where the water hit it. That's where the barn and hog house used to be. Clean sweep. Wash house looks like it's okay. One cone being gone. New shed gone. See a couple of dead hogs. There's one right here in this pile we can see. Open windows where we were in that room. We climbed out on the roof and down that little desk to get out.
Hundreds of Virginia farmers have suffered one of the worst disasters in a century. Farmers here lost an estimated $29 million worth of livestock, fencing, equipment, hay and corn, as virtually every stream and river in the county flooded like never before. $54 million is the preliminary estimate of flood damage across the state, with Halifax and Rockbridge counties the second and third most affected localities.
While these material items can be replaced over time, the fertile topsoil that washed away along bottomlands is lost for years to come. But Madison County, situated along the eastern slopes of the Blue Ridge, endured the brunt of Mother Nature's assault on Virginia. From lost cattle to downed fences and washed out bridges, damage estimates have reached into the tens of millions of dollars. As the rebuilding process continues, one thing is certain. Farmers in more than a dozen Virginia counties will never forget the flood of 1995. In Madison County, I'm Greg Hicks.
When we heard and saw that second wave coming, I was telling, I think it was one of the Mennonites that were here helping about it. He said, "You didn't know you could pray so quick, did you?"
Well, you lived through it, and it's you don't forget it. You know, it's something that the people that went through it will never, I'm sure, never forget.